Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Welcome to this late session and panel. Thanks for coming out. So we have 30 minutes, and we want to at least have 15 minutes to get your questions and debate with you. So I want to dive right in and maybe ask you, Ambassador, you've told me that you were on the campaign trail for quite a while, actually. You managed California for Mr. Clinton in '92, and now you're seeing all these changes in the way political campaigning, election campaigns are managed. I mean, if 2008, the Obama campaign, was the last proof that social media, it's not a question of if social media can change and affect elections, then now it's a matter of how and in what way. What do you make of the use of social media, big data, technology in the current campaign?
Well, the thing that strikes me is how quickly things have changed. I first got actively involved politically in the 1980s. I was running the California campaign and then national for a guy named Gary Hart. And in those days, we barely had computers. They had very primitive software for tracking supporters and donors and that kind of thing. Things were often written down on cards, 3x5 cards that were held in card files. You had addresses. The first order of business of a campaign was to people move all the time. They changed their phone numbers to try to get that information set. Then in 1992, you had, first of all, we had cell phones for the first time. Secondly, we had computers and a little bit more sophisticated databases. But the interesting thing that happened in regard to this question was that was the first campaign where the presidential candidate, Bill Clinton, made an affirmative effort to get beyond the normal news media and go over the heads of them and talk directly to the people. And he did that through a couple of things. One, through holding town hall meetings all over the country. A very famous bus tour that he and Hillary and his vice presidential nominee Al Gore and his wife did, literally bus tour going into small towns throughout middle America. But the third thing was he started going on television shows and radio shows that were non-traditional political venues. There were basically the late night shows and that kind of thing. And then, as you said, '08 was a real breakthrough year. It was the year when you got bombarded by emails if you were an Obama supporter or a Democrat or someone they thought might be a Democrat. By the way, you don't have to worry about people moving their addresses if you're hitting them on email. It doesn't matter where they're living. They started, Twitter was just beginning at that point in time, but Facebook was getting up and moving, and they really used that as an opportunity to talk to voters. And now, in today's campaign, that's almost the leading edge. Candidates don't announce anymore with big rallies and lots of press. They basically announce on Twitter or on Facebook or on their website. And the idea is that you have much more direct communication and interaction between candidates and voters, and more to the point, voters talk to their friends about the candidates. So there's much more conversation going on within the public square, if you will, but the digital public square. And that, I think, increases excitement and energy about the campaign, but it also creates opportunities for misinformation as well. So there's a bit of a downside.
You're here in Berlin for almost 3 years now, right? As the US ambassador. Maybe you can talk about the cultural differences in the perception of this new way of communicating with candidates, of this immediacy, this intimacy, because, I mean, this election campaign has even seen candidates being advocated on Tinder. Hillary Clinton is all over Snapchat. But I feel that there is a different approach. It feels really natural in the States, but there's a different perception of that in Germany. I could hardly imagine Sigmar Gabriel or any other candidate being enforced on Snapchat. I'm assuming it will happen next year, but are there cultural differences as an observer of both worlds? Maybe you can.
Yeah,
touch on
I
that.
would say there are. I would say, for one thing, Americans tend to be eager first adapters of any new technology that comes up. Oh, there's a new iPhone, I got to buy it. Oh, they used to be, you see people going from email to Facebook to WhatsApp to Snapchat to, and Twitter to Tinder, whatever, and they just quickly adopt it, adapt to it, and move on. Whereas I think in Germany, probably in part because you had a 50-year history of being fearful of the use of technology to suppress and oppress people by the Third Reich and the Stasi, there's sort of a baked-in skepticism about this. And the best example of that, or what I assume is an example of that, is the fact that in 2013, after the coalition agreement between the Grand Coalition between the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats was negotiated, Sigmar Gabriel said he wasn't going to approve the agreement until all his members voted to approve it. Well, he had to mail it. We said, well, how long is that going to take? A couple of weeks. Why? Because we've got to mail out the coalition agreement and wait for a response back. So why don't you just email it? You won't kill as many trees. And the answer was because we have less than half of the email addresses of SPD members. And part of the reason of that is people were reluctant to give their email addresses. On the embassy Facebook page, we have a proportionately lower number of likes than most other places in Western Europe. And this was before NSA, when people were mad at us. I mean, we were having much lower likes than what you had in other parts of Europe. And then I remember talking to the CEO of Bertelsmann, and I was asking him about publishing because they own so many publishing houses. I said, what is digital publishing doing to your business? Because presumably they make less money on that. And he goes, well, thank goodness for Germany. He said in the United States, about 1/3 of all book sales now are digital publishing. In Germany, it's about 12%. And so I do think there's a skepticism about the reliance on and the use of these things. But there's also a nice element to that, which is my experience as ambassador is that Germans tend to be more attentive, and they tend to be more willing to sit and actually listen to a prolonged discussion, a prolonged debate. I think Americans tend to be a little too ADD, if you will, in terms of wanting their information quickly and then wanting to move on. And I don't know if that's a chicken-egg thing. I don't know if all this time spent with people staring into their phones creates that dynamic, or if that's a cultural thing, but it is a difference.
I like your optimism there, and I think we're going to find out today at this evening time if people will actually have listened to us and have all these questions later. But if we see political discourse and debates increasingly moving into the digital sphere, what about issues of censorship, of moderation? Because from what I understand, there's a big difference in the way we perceive unjust, illegal, harassing, discriminating statements in the United States and in Germany, and it certainly poses a big challenge to the way political discussions are held in social media. What do you make of that? What about hate speech and stuff?
Well, I think there is a difference. I think the laws in Germany, and again, this may have to do with its historical past, are much tougher on cracking down on anything that could be interpreted as hate speech than the laws in the United States, which has as the First Amendment to the Constitution freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. So in the US, you cannot incite immediate violence. You cannot libel someone, in terms of your speech. You can't use it to do things like, transact, child pornography or things like that. But you have much more latitude in your ability to make waves politically, if you will, through through the public square and through the internet. And I know there's this issue with Facebook in terms of clamping down on hate speech in Germany and in the United States. And we talked to Sheryl Sandberg about this, my wife Kimberly and I, when she was at our house not too long ago. And their focus is on counter speech. So providing an opportunity to really engage in a debate and get the opposite point of view out there and out their heart. Now, there is one element of this, which is that the ISIL and the terrorists who were really responsible for what happened in Paris, what happened in Brussels, have become very effective at using these tools to recruit and to radicalize and to motivate and to activate young radicals who then go on to commit acts of terror against their fellow citizens. And this is a problem, and this is something we need to deal with. But I think the American point of view is the first step is we need to engage in a different conversation, in a more rigorous conversation about a different way of life, about what our values all are. But I do think, that is a difference. I think the bigger danger in all this is the increased polarization that you see in part, I think, because of social media. And what started out as a big conversation among people has now become a situation where people more and more are just gravitating to listen to people who they think they're going to agree with, who espouse the kinds of views that they agree with. I mean, I've seen on Facebook, for instance, I have friends who are Sanders supporters, I have friends who are Clinton supporters, and I've seen email or Facebook postings of people saying, if you don't stop putting those negative things about, my candidate, I'm going to unfriend you. And we joke in the States, but it's not really a joke that conservatives watch Fox News and liberals watch MSNBC. The problem with that is you're just sort of getting fed one point of view, and I think that's ultimately harmful. And there's a question about whether even the algorithms from some of these search sites will favor, when you search an issue, for instance, will favor feeding you information about that issue or commentary on that issue that you'll agree with politically. And I'm not so sure that's a good thing either.
Talking about election campaigns and polarization, maybe we can talk about the current campaign. From what I see in Germany is that the most Facebook fans any party has is the AfD, and that's as many as I think SPD and CDU combined. So we've seen a huge difference here, and this may be part due to social media experts, but it's also, I think, due to what you just described and what I would say is the filter bubble in political discourse. How do we move on here?
Well, we're at a point, and it's not obviously just what you've seen in Germany or what you see in Poland or Austria or Hungary or France, but you clearly are seeing it in the United States. And I mean, candidly, this is something that's fueling both the Trump and the Sanders campaign, is there's a lot of anger out there. And what's happened is you've got candidates who are sort of taking advantage of that or feeding on that as a way of and reinforcing it in many respects as a way of building political support. And I think fundamentally a lot what the anger has to do with, and really across the board, is a sense that the big institutions of power, government and the big corporations and companies aren't really working for everyday people and don't have their interest at heart. And whether that's true or not, it's certainly the way a lot of people are feeling. And I think that if there's a lesson to the government leaders, to the leaders of civil society, we need to get underneath that and find out what that's all about and begin to address it, because it's certainly not productive to have political campaigns that are just fueled by anger and backed by empty slogans. And that's kind of the direction that we seem to have been moving in this current campaign in the United States. And I think it concerns a lot of people.
We should probably include the media in that as well, actually. When we
Well,
talk
the
about
media
institutions.
certainly helped create Donald Trump. There's no question about that. Hey, he's good for ratings. We're going to put him on TV. Oh my God, what's he said now? Let's put that on TV. And they acknowledge it. The president at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which is where the joke from "Drop the Mic" came from, he actually gave him a hard time on that. He said, "Hey, you guys have done a pretty good job there," and you've even begun to see some commentary in the media about that. Is were they just covering the sensational part of the campaign, or were they truly diving into the important issues that need to be analyzed and discussed? Because this is a very consequential election in the United States of America coming up, and we need more of that kind of coverage and that kind of analysis.
I want to open it up to the crowd, and I'm excited for your questions. We have a handheld microphone, so if you could just raise your hands if you have a question. I certainly have some more, but I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I got a microphone with me, so I will be the runner. So the first question comes from the first row.
Yes, I'd actually like to refer to that issue you just mentioned there. You ran a campaign, that's quite a while ago. When you look at your colleagues now in the United States, what's your suspicion? How much more time are they spending on thinking about algorithms and mastering the arts of digital technology rather than actually trying to get messages across, or I dare say, talk about substantial issues?
Well, actually, they're spending a heck of a lot more time on it, but it's not without a message relevance. So the big thing that in 2013, and some would say it may be one of the reasons that President Obama was able to get reelected over Mitt Romney, they focused on micro-targeting. And micro-targeting, I mean, literally it's at the block level, it's at the neighborhood level, and it's trying to, through social media and other means, identify what people are worried about in that level, and then give them a very specific message that relates to that. So, for instance, if you care about education, and you got a kid in school, and your school's falling apart and all that, you really don't need me to talk to you about climate change and biofuels, okay? But if you live in Iowa and you're, you run a small farm and your revenues are, fundamentally driven by, purchases of your corn for biotechnology, you may care about that, and maybe you're not so worried about education because you're homeschooling your kid. So that's what the micro-targeting is. So it isn't ignoring messaging, it's just delivering messages in a very focused and narrow way. Now you could say, oh my gosh, what opportunity for abuse. Somebody could they find out this person likes A, this person likes not A, they say the A to this person, they say not A to that person. Well, the good news about the media, the internet, and all that is all this stuff is ultimately public, and a lot of folks in the media are pretty good at virtually every newspaper now has a sort of truth squad that looks at the advertisements, that looks at the statements of the candidates and says, hey, are they lying? Are they being hypocritical? Is this attack legitimate? And trying to, in effect, validate or invalidate comments that people say. But that's what's happening. They spend an enormous, when I was doing political campaigns, we had maybe one or two people who did technology. And it was all about basically voter files and donor bases. And, keeping track of the people who are contributing to you, and keeping track of the people who said they wanted to support the candidate, work, volunteer in the campaign. Now, I bet you that in these big campaigns, you look at the Clinton campaign or the Sanders campaign, for instance, I bet you a majority of the paid people have technology jobs in that campaign. That's a huge difference.
Any more questions? Don't be shy.
There's one. Maybe you can stand up and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Michael Scaturo, and I've got a quick question. You're seeing sort of like a lot of outrage, people, expressing outrage through highly involved stakeholders, right? So my question is, how can governments, how can companies, NGOs even, mitigate outrage, mitigate the sort of outrage you're seeing this week with the Greenpeace leaks? Thanks.
I'm sorry, this week with what?
With the Greenpeace TTIP leak?
Like you're seeing like with the Greenpeace TTIP leaks, a
The
lot
green-
of
right, right, right.
outrage. So how can governments mitigate?
Well, I think that one way to mitigate outrage is not to play into it. You know, I mean, as an example, on the TTIP Greenpeace, situation, this is how negotiations go. Somebody makes a demand, somebody makes another demand over here, and then they keep working towards it and get to something in the middle. And, the fact that a demand was maybe way over here and another demand was way over here, it's not news. It's not anything to get excited about. And it's been interesting to watch some of the press commentary and the reactions from both the White House and the Chancellery to the disclosure. It's kind of like, yeah, so your point is? I mean, the deal is going to be the deal. It'll be all very, very public and transparent and discussed and debated for months before anybody has to cast a vote on it. And that's what really matters. And beyond that, neither side politically will ever agree to a lowering of consumer safety or environmental or health or labor standards, because it wouldn't sell politically in their own countries. And they're not committed to that. That's not what they're all about. So, but some people get so wound up and look at this. And the same thing, is happening with the Trump stuff as an example. You see, I got to be careful here because I'm not allowed to make negative comments about candidates. So I'm just speaking factually. I'm not expressing an opinion. But Donald Trump will make a comment, for instance, that gets people's attention. And all the coverage is about, can you believe he said that? Can you believe he said that? Can you believe? And then somebody else saying, that's outrageous that he said it. As opposed to, let's back up, let's back away, let's look at what the underlying issue is, and let's have a discussion about how maybe we can address that particular problem that's arising. So I think that candidly, there has to be a little bit more responsibility shown by both members of government and people in the media, and particularly political candidates, candidly, who tend to jump on this stuff. And look at all the shouting that's going on in this campaign, as an example. And so I think that it really starts with that. And then the second piece is, I don't know, maybe things like this. I mean, to try to have reasonable, thoughtful discussions about what the issues really are. And I think we all need to take a chill pill from now and then, because it's sometimes fun to react and get upset. I mean, I see that, I see that with friends. They're like, can you believe this? And da-da-da-da. And it's just like, yeah, okay, well, let's just take a chill pill for a minute and not get so worked up that we, in effect, make the situation worse. But it's, unfortunately, outrage on one level is kind of fun. And so people play into it. It makes for good TV. Look at all those horrifyingly bad television talk shows that were, usually in the middle of the afternoon in the United States, where the whole objective was to get people fighting with one another on stage. It makes television. And so that's why I think there needs to be a level of media responsibility. And if they're not doing it, people in the digital community can certainly do that, because you've got the resources to try to engage in a much more thoughtful conversation about things.
I'm afraid we only have time for...
One guy liked it.
I think we have time for one more question.
One more question, yeah.
And the question is in the front row.
Two more, actually. Wow.
Yes, my name is Julius Endert, and in former times we said we have every medium has its form of candidate, like a candidate for radio times, candidate for TV. What's your opinion? How about digital technology is changing the kind of candidates we see or we will see?
The kind of candidates that we'll see? Okay. Well, I think it's clearly it will. What digital technology? I'm thinking about this because I've never thought about this before. It's an interesting question. clearly television created a different kind of candidate. Everybody knows the story about the Kennedy-Nixon debate where people who listened on the radio thought Nixon won, people who watched TV thought Kennedy won because he just looked so good and he was so calm and relaxed and all that. And that sort of ushered in the television era of politics. I think what's interesting is to look at Sanders' campaign in that regard. So that is a campaign that I think is uniquely suited to digital media. Because first of all, this is a 72-year-old guy with his hair flying all over the place who shouts and screams all the time. He is the antithesis of what you'd say is a cool, television-like candidate. But he's got a very simple and direct series of messages that are perfect for 144 characters and for people to kind of friend and go back and forth on. And then he's also structured his fundraising to focus on this small, 100% on the small donor contributions. He doesn't go to fundraising events. He just, it's just all on the internet, all, the $5, the $10, the $15, $25, and he's raising, $10, $15, $25 million a month doing this. So maybe one change will be that the kind of candidate is, or maybe it's not even the kind of candidate, it may mean that the blow-dry television thing is less important and the having a salient message that can be quickly and effectively delivered becomes more important. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing because it's, and it's always been somewhat like that in politics. You got these slogans or whatever that tend to crystallize an election. But I think it's way more so in the digital world today. But that's a great question.
So, one last question. What was the question? Yeah.
Hello. I was just wondering, like 8 years ago, it was kind of exciting that Obama was using Twitter because it was new. And nowadays it's kind of funny what Trump is writing on Twitter and other social networks. But I feel like the use of social networks has become kind of stale for me because the novelty factor is wearing off. So do you see that there's more potential or that social media or digital means could be used more creatively than it's done today? Because it kind of bores me nowadays.
Well, the question is, why does it bore you? Does it bore you because it's just not, interesting or new, or you're just so used to seeing it? If that's the case, then there are a lot of smart people in this room who are already probably working on the next new thing, and I think you'll continue to see those come around. Or does it bore you because it's too little, too opinionated, and you don't feel like you're getting fed the kind of information and discussion that you want? What's interesting about that is that's good news for newspapers. That's good news for thoughtful commentators or television shows where people actually sit down and talk, or shows online like that, or sessions or forums like this, where people can actually, when you meet with people here and have a discussion around here, you're not talking in 144, digits or whatever you call it. You're actually having a conversation. So there was a book written back in the early 1980s called Megatrends. And it's a guy named Nesbitt, who, I forget his first name, but he talked about 10 mega trends that he saw with the whole technology revolution. And one of them was, that always stuck with me, was high touch, high tech. Or high tech, high touch. And it was the more we go into a tech world where people just communicating digitally, where they don't need to come to the office and work, they work at home, they telecommute, that kind of thing, the more people are going to crave human interaction. And maybe one thing that's happening is we've gone so much to everybody, it's that New Yorker cartoon of the family sitting at dinner and everybody's just staring at their telephone, right? And that maybe we've gone so much in that direction that we're going to see sort of a return to the other. I really don't know the answer to it, but it's certainly an intriguing question. Thank you.
I think we have to wrap the session as there's another one coming up here, but I just want to thank you all for being here. Ambassador, thank you. Thanks for the discussion, and see you later.
Thank you guys. Thanks very much.